Canada is suddenly declaring war on immigration. Imagine this: Canada, a country known for its multicultural tapestry and open arms to immigrants, has just pulled an unprecedented move. The government has slashed its immigration numbers not by a little, but by a lot. Permanent immigration levels are now dropping by at least 20%, and temporary immigration is down nearly 500,000 annually. For the first time, Canada's federal government isn't just slowing down its population growth, it's actively pushing to reduce it to almost zero. This isn't a slight adjustment. It's a full-on U-turn from the policy that has defined Canada for decades. It's a move that has left people stunned, and one that's sparking big questions about what's really going on in Canada. So why has Canada gone from an open-door policy to practically locking the door? Well, the Prime Minister laid it out with three priorities: healthcare, housing, and social services. Canada's population isn't just growing, it's skyrocketing. Over the past 2 years, the country has welcomed more than 1 million new residents. For context, that's more than triple the usual rate of population growth. To put it in perspective, Canada typically grows by around 300,000 people a year, and suddenly it was growing by over 1 million every 2 years. Statistics Canada reported that a jaw-dropping 98% of that growth was driven by immigration, as cities across the country struggled to absorb these new residents. It was like a runaway train, and it's left Canada scrambling to keep up. Let's talk about housing. Historically, Canada has kept a balance, building about one home for every 2 new people, a sweet spot that kept prices steady and homes available. But that balance is way off now. Since 2016, that ratio has doubled. Canada now builds just one home for every 4 new working-aged people. This means housing hasn't just become harder to find, it's also way more expensive. Back in early 2020, before the pandemic, the average Canadian house was priced at around $540,000. But by 2022, that price had shot up to a whopping $840,000. And even now, as the market stabilizes, homes are still nearly $200,000 more expensive than they were before the pandemic. For renters, the news isn't any better. Vacancy rates are hitting record lows, and rents have spiked nationwide, pricing out many newcomers and longtime residents alike. It's a market on fire, fueled by demand that's outpacing supply at every turn. But housing is just one piece of the puzzle. Canada's healthcare system is also buckling under pressure. In 2019, there were about 91,000 doctors in Canada. Fast forward to today, and despite millions of new residents, Canada has only added around 6,000 more doctors. This leaves an enormous gap, with an estimated 6.5 million Canadians now without a family doctor, up from 4.5 million just 4 years ago. The consequence? People without family doctors end up in emergency rooms, causing ER visits to surge by over 1 million in the last year alone. Wait times are up by 40% since 2020, and hospitals are stretched to the limit. Recent studies show that immigrants, especially new ones, are often the hardest hit, struggling to find care in a system that's already overwhelmed. This strain extends to other infrastructure too. Take Prince Edward Island, for example. Last year, it saw a record-breaking 33% rise in immigration, putting unprecedented demand on everything from roads to power. Maritime Electric, the region's main power provider, is struggling to keep up, with its grid running near capacity. And PEI isn't alone. Provinces from coast to coast are facing similar pressures, trying to meet the demands of millions of new residents without adequate time or resources. The social impacts are becoming more pronounced too. A recent survey found that nearly half of Canadians now view immigration levels as too high, a significant jump from just a year ago. It's a shift in sentiment that's accompanied by rising frustration over what some are calling a scarcity mindset around housing, healthcare, and social services. People are increasingly seeing these resources as limited, and when they feel squeezed, they want change. Even the Liberal government, long known for its pro-immigration stance, is acknowledging this reality. In a rare admission, the government has essentially admitted it didn't quite get the balance right. It's a mea culpa to voters, a signal that they're aware of the issue and taking decisive steps to correct course. This brings us to the economic impact. For years, Canada's economy has leaned on immigration as a growth engine, helping to stave off recession by filling jobs and supporting customer spending. Immigration has driven Canada's labor market, with new workers fueling sectors from healthcare to technology. In 2023 alone, Canada admitted nearly 250,000 temporary foreign workers, almost double the number from 5 years ago. Yet these workers often find themselves in low-wage jobs, adding to stress on social services and driving up costs for everyone. The unemployment rate for immigrants, for example, sits at nearly 12% compared to 6.4% of the general population. It's a dynamic that has stirred controversy, with critics arguing that Canada's reliance on low-wage migrant labor is undercutting wages and limiting job growth. Meanwhile, the temporary foreign worker program is undergoing its own changes. As of late September, the government has limited low-wage foreign workers in cities with unemployment above 6%, reducing their employment terms from 2 years to 1. These changes are expected to cut the number of temporary foreign workers by roughly 65,000 annually. It's a major shift, and the impact will be felt by employers and communities alike, as Canada recalibrates its approach to temporary migration. But there's another aspect of immigration that's caught the attention of Canada's neighbor to the south: asylum seekers. In recent months, there's been a record-breaking number of irregular crossings from Canada into the United States, with over 18,600 encounters in May alone. The fiscal year is on track to see over 127,000 such encounters, surpassing last year's numbers. This surge has led the Biden administration to tighten border policies, aligning the northern border with its stricter southern counterpart. Immigration has become a hot-button issue on both sides of the border, with political leaders facing mounting pressure to address security and economic concerns. Back in Canada, public opinion on immigration is shifting rapidly. A June poll found that 44% of Canadians now view immigration negatively, up 6 points from last October. A Ledger poll went further, showing that 65% of Canadians believe the government's targets are too high, with over 3/4 attributing rising costs in housing and healthcare to immigration. Interestingly, political affiliation plays a big role in these views. 64% of conservative supporters believe immigration levels are too high, compared to just 29% among liberal supporters. In fact, housing costs have become so closely tied to immigration in the public's mind that the majority now believe that high immigration is a driving factor behind Canada's housing crisis. This belief wasn't as prevalent just a year ago, but as costs have soared, Canadians have started looking for answers, and immigration has become an easy target. Economists and policy experts warn that this view oversimplifies a complex problem, but the perception is growing nonetheless. Canada's situation has even prompted concerns of rising xenophobia. Hate crimes against visible minorities have doubled since 2019, with 44.5% of incidents in 2023 motivated by race or ethnicity. Balpreet Singh from the World Sikh Organization of Canada points out that visible minorities are often scapegoated, with members of the Sikh community frequently targeted in hate incidents. Community leaders and advocates are urging the government to tread carefully, emphasizing the need to maintain Canada's multicultural identity in a time of economic strain. But while xenophobia is a worrying trend, many Canadians still believe in the positive impact of immigration. A recent study by the Environics Institute showed that 3/4 of Canadians agree immigration is beneficial for the economy, though that number has dropped by 11 points since last year. The drop is sharpest among homeowners worried about housing costs and conservative supporters, reflecting a growing divide in Canadian society. Atlantic Canada and British Columbia, however, show higher support for immigration, with many residents appreciating the role immigrants play in boosting local economies and promoting diversity. In the face of all this, Canada is at a crossroads. Immigration Minister Mark Miller recently reiterated the government's commitment to immigration as a core part of the country's identity. However, he also acknowledged that the pace of recent growth has been unsustainable, and the government is now focused on bringing population growth back to manageable levels. For now, Canada is betting that a temporary reduction in immigration will provide the breathing room needed to rebuild the infrastructure, housing, and healthcare systems that have been stretched to their limits. As Canada braces for the next election, immigration will undoubtedly remain a defining issue. The Liberal government's approach signals a careful balance, a recognition of the pressures on infrastructure and the need to scale back, while still affirming that immigration is essential to Canada's identity and economy. The question now is whether these changes will be enough to address the underlying challenges, or if they will fuel an even larger debate about the future of immigration in Canada. Canada's story has always been one of open doors, new beginnings, and diverse communities. But as it faces the reality of rapid, unchecked growth, the country must reckon with what immigration means in a world of limited resources and heightened economic strain. For now, Canada is pressing pause on high immigration, a move that will reshape its landscape and, possibly, its identity. Only time will tell if this recalibration can offer a sustainable path forward. If you liked the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into Canada's latest news and policies. And let us know in the comments, what do you think about the country's new approach to immigration? Do you think it's the right move?